All right, well, we did have some drama last night in the college football coaching world, guys. I'm going to be going through all of the major openings today, but first we've got to talk about the Texas A&M situation, and we know how crazy college football fans are. I mean, college football is literally the only sport where the fan bases can have such an uprising. It causes a university to change course on a hire. Looks like that could have been what happened with Mark Stoops, who was always a strange idea, especially when I heard it last night. Mark Stoops going to be the next coach of Texas A&M. Kind of a down year at Kentucky, wasn't great. They did beat Louisville, but still a very strange and subdued hire by Texas A&M standards. That is a top 10 job in college football, and I do think I'm being very conservative with that. You could make the argument Texas A&M is a top 3 or 4 job in college football based off of its infrastructure, the amount of money they have with their boosters, all of the oil money and stuff, and their fans were angry. It seems like a very similar situation to Greg Schiano at Tennessee. I mean, those Tennessee fans were so mad they just would not accept it. It was a literal uprising. And then here we have Kentucky head coach Mark Stoops is staying in Lexington, so it's going to be a very awkward situation for him. Seems like he wanted to go to A&M. Why would you not? It's a massive bump in pay. You're getting way better resources, but now a lot of the fan base, some of the boosters didn't like the idea of Mark Stoops, and he will be staying with Kentucky. Kind of a strange fit in general. Looking at the overall odds, these are not the updated odds. This was from right after Jimbo Fisher was fired, but you can see Dan Lanning would certainly be the home run hire, and a lot of people saying, well, Dan Lanning wouldn't leave Oregon. You can see DeBoer with Washington as well. I do think Texas A&M is going to be gunning for one of those guys, maybe Leipold from Kansas, and they're probably going to get one of those guys considering the bump in pay. It's going to be so big. You know, we've seen this time and time again with coaches. I'm not leaving, and then 2 days later it's announced Lane Kiffin also there. I don't know. I mean, for Texas A&M, I'll just be honest. Lane Kiffin, guys, it's not a good fit. Texas A&M has been through they almost seem kind of like a gimmicky program right now. They need a solid coach. I would go possibly, really, you want to go to Dan Lanning. That's the home run hire. Try and pay him whatever you can. I understand Oregon fans are going to say he's never going to leave. We have Nike money. We're going into the Big Ten. But still, if it's such a massive bump in pay, which it could be, although you still have to remember they're paying Jimbo Fisher that massive buyout, so who knows? Dan Lanning is there. If you're trying to get DeBoer, you know, you're going to have to wait a bit considering Washington possibly could make the playoff depending on what they do against Oregon. You're also going to have to wait for Dan Lanning, and that's why I see A&M dragging out this coaching search. Mike Norvell, that's one I really don't see what would be the purpose of him leaving FSU. There's always the idea that Deion Sanders will go to FSU, but right now I think FSU is perfectly fine with Norvell and the job that he's doing. Also considering Deion Sanders seemingly, he's got some issues there at Colorado with some of his coaching staff leaving and going 4-8 and what have you. But right now, when it comes to A&M, I think their top guy is Dan Lanning. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the Ryan Day stuff. It's complete nonsense. I would say the Lincoln Riley stuff is complete nonsense. I know both of them, especially Ryan Day, has been linked to Texas A&M, and Ryan Day certainly is 1-3 against Ohio State. The Buckeyes, the fan base, not happy, but you have to put it in perspective. Ryan Day still has a crazy good record. You're going to the 12-team playoff next year. Obviously, it's a learning curve right now for Day. He is owned by Michigan, there's no doubt about it, but he can still turn it around at Ohio State. He has the recruiting. He has more talent than Michigan. Michigan very likely going to be hit with some type of penalty. I think Ohio State fans need to calm down on Ryan Day. It's been tough, I get it, but it was tough for Kirby Smart his first 4 or 5 years at Georgia too. Be patient with it. Ryan Day's not going anywhere. And then when it comes to Lincoln Riley, I think Lincoln Riley right now might actually be underrated. Lincoln Riley is an amazing offensive coach. He's obviously just not a good defensive coach at all. And his issue is he's had one of the worst defensive coordinators in college football attached to his hip the past 2 years at USC and Alex Grinch. He fires Alex Grinch. If I was Lincoln Riley, you have to get a top-tier defensive coordinator because you're obviously not a defensive coach. Get a defensive coordinator where you can say, just take control of the defense. You go, you're good. Lincoln Riley at A&M would be pretty crazy, though, because of the infrastructure and the talent that they have. They already have crazy talent on their defensive line. Imagine Lincoln Riley there, and he gets his pick of the litter. Maybe he brings Malachi Nelson, the 5-star quarterback, that's currently at USC. He recruited him. Imagine he brings him with him. Maybe they get Arch Manning in the transfer portal, although I know Texas fans say Arch Manning is staying no matter what. It's an interesting idea because Quinn Ewers is coming back. We normally don't see a number one overall player sit for 2 straight years. Remember, this was the Quinn Ewers dilemma when he went to Ohio State and then transferred back because C.J. Stroud was going to be the starter. He came to Ohio State a year early. A lot of people say it's because of NIL, but either way, it'll be interesting to see what Texas A&M ends up doing. You also have New Mexico firing Danny Gonzalez. They're not sure where they're going to go, but obviously New Mexico kind of out of the national picture right now. Michigan State, the huge hire. Let me tell you, Michigan State certainly... They got very lucky. Let's just say that. They fire Mel Tucker. They gave him that crazy guaranteed contract. What a disaster that was. And now they get Jonathan Smith, who is an up-and-coming coach out of the Pac-12. It makes perfect sense for Jonathan Smith considering Oregon State's precarious situation when it comes to them not being a part of a conference next year. They're going to do this schedule rotation with the Mountain West. Kind of a strange situation there. If you're Jonathan Smith, get yourself into a secure job. He does just that. And it's just a really, really unfortunate thing for Oregon State. But I would give that hire like a B+. I think it's solid if you're Michigan State. I mean, if you want to talk about the entire situation, like being able to get out of that Mel Tucker disaster contract, that's a masterclass by Michigan State. That's an A+ situation. I mean, you can see they gave it a grade as an A+. I would say the entire situation's an A+ because Mel Tucker had a fully guaranteed contract. They thought Mel Tucker would go somewhere else. They wanted to secure him. And obviously, Mel Tucker has just very little track record. Jonathan Smith, you could say, well, Oregon State just started being better. But Jonathan Smith's been able to utilize the transfer portal really well. He gets DJ Uiagalelei, and you really don't have a lot to work with at Oregon State. So that's a good hire. And now Oregon State, unfortunately, that job is not going to be attractive at all, considering their situation in between conferences. Syracuse needs a new head coach. I think it's going to be pretty tough for Syracuse. The issue is the lack of talent in the Northeast when it comes to that job. Mississippi State, I mean, they're an SEC school, but I feel like teams like Mississippi State are going to be buried now with the conference realignment, with Texas and Oklahoma coming to that conference. It's going to be very hard for Mississippi. I mean, it's already really hard as it is being in the Big Ten West, but it's even going to get harder. We will see who they go after. I know there were some people that were very angry. Mississippi State fired Arnett, who really, was 5-6. He didn't, coach much. It was his first year. I'm guessing they just realized they made the wrong decision and they self-corrected rather than wasting another year with a coach that they don't think is very good. I think it's better to be proactive if you're a team. I understand there's the idea, be patient with him, but they obviously know better than anyone else the inner workings of that program. And if he's a bad coach, he's a bad coach. Get rid of him, move on, say it's a mistake. Better to do it, rip the Band-Aid off right away than let it linger for one too many years. Boise State, let me tell you something. Boise State is really an under the radar program this season. I understand, what did they finish, 7-5? They have really good analytics. They are crushing teams towards the end of the season. We know Boise State's potential. They were always the best group of 5 team. They've kind of fallen off recently. That'll be an interesting job. Boise State has a lot of fan support there, and they can really build themselves back up with part of the Mountain West, possibly getting Washington State and Oregon State as well into that conference. It'll be interesting. Obviously, A&M, I think that's their top hire would be Dan Lanning, Lincoln Riley, someone like that. You would settle for, maybe the Washington coach if it came to it, but the idea that it was going to be Mark Stoops, I agree with Texas A&M fans. That would be a bad hire. If I was Texas A&M, I think an even worse hire for A&M, just like I said, it would be someone like Lane Kiffin. I just think that would not be a good fit for A&M. And then you can see the other thing, Sam Pittman, retained by Arkansas. Really not sure what's going on here. I thought it was an obvious fire situation. Sam Pittman, an offensive line coach, that's going to really hurt your recruiting, especially when it comes to skill position players. Not exactly sure what Arkansas is doing sticking with Sam Pittman. This was a disaster season. You had KJ Jefferson back for like his 4th year. It was supposed to be big. and they end up retaining him. I do not think Arkansas obviously is going to be very good next year. We will see if they're able to utilize the transfer portal, though. Maybe they want some continuity, but that's just a shocking decision considering I was surprised, this day and age, you're hiring an offensive line coach to be your head coach. That is a really, really brutal thing to make work just in general, especially when it comes to recruiting skill position players. And then you can see Indiana fires Tom Allen. He went 33-49. He had that magical season, if you guys remember, during the pandemic. Everyone was like, oh, Indiana should make the Big Ten Conference Championship because Ohio State didn't play enough games, and Ohio State ended up making it. But either way, yeah, Indiana at this point, this is a good move by them. Tom Allen was getting stale. It wasn't working. Go into a younger direction, go into a different direction rather than continuing to go 4-8 every year, 3-9. You're in a tough conference. You're in a really tough division, but that firing also happened. So that is kind of the update on the coaching carousel here. Texas A&M, obviously the biggest job by far. And we will see. I think that's a domino that's going to take a few weeks depending on. They're probably going to go for a head coach that's currently still alive for the college football playoff. At least that's my prediction right now. Although A&M could step back, maybe say, listen, we tried to do a splash hire with Jimbo Fisher. Let's stay local. Let's stay in state and go for the UTSA coach, who he's got a very nice program there. Although that would really be underwhelming for the fan base there. We will see what ends up happening. But either way, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.